Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So this is my second attempt at trying to film this video. My memory card was full, so I'm not going to do much of an introduction. I'm just going to jump into starting to talk about the books. So November was a pretty good reading month. I'm pretty pleased with this wrap up, I have to say. I'm still looking for that one book that's really gonna blow me out of the water. I haven't had that since probably this past spring, and so still on the hunt, hoping for that in December. But having said that, I did still have some really fantastic reads this month. A couple that weren't so great, but a couple that were really good. So jumping right in here, and of course this is my TBR that my husband helped me pick out. So he picked out these physical books for me to read, and then I did some additional books on top of that. So the first one that Matthew picked out was Haunted Peak District by Jill Armitage, and this was okay. I was a little bit disappointed with this book because this is about the district of Derbyshire over in the UK, and apparently it's one of those places that's a real hotspot for paranormal activity. And I was really excited to get into this and read some of the stories, but honestly some of them were really short, so they would only be a few paragraphs long and then they would move on to something else. There were a couple in here that were a little bit longer, but you know, when I kind of sink into reading, even if it is a little bit of a shorter tale, you know, it's almost like it was over before it even got started. So I was a little bit disappointed. It did have some great pictures in here, and like I said, some of the stories were quite good. But just for example, so here you have one that it's literally just a paragraph. So, you know, I would have liked if this was kind of fleshed out a little bit more. It was okay. So I think I gave this one 2.5 stars, which is not great, but I mean, it's still halfway there. So if you're looking for a great haunted read, you know, still pick this one up if you come across it. I wouldn't say, you know, go out to Amazon right now and put it on your wish list, but it was okay. And next up was the first book in the Skullduggery Pleasant series by Landy. And this was a really cute adventure. I really enjoyed this. You know, a little girl who finds out that her uncle was involved in this kind of fantastical world and she has powers of her own, and she's one of those sort of outsiders that she thinks a little bit differently than most of the other people in her family and stuff like that. And she meets this really cool character named Skullduggery Pleasant, and he kind of opens her up to this entire world of magic, and there's important artifacts that have gone missing and people that you think are your friends who turn out to be enemies. And you know, it was a really cute adventure. But I have to say that it was kind of one of those books that I enjoyed it. I really did. But it wasn't one of those ones where you feel like you're really hooked in and you sink into the world. It was just kind of, I was flitting over the top of it. You know, I didn't care really deeply about the characters. Like I said, it was really good. It is kind of one of those books that's a little bit forgettable, so I enjoyed it. It was okay. I'm not sure if I'm going to pick up the rest of the series in this one, but if you have younger kids at home that are into sort of spooky fantasy, or if you're into that yourself, still recommend picking up this one. But for me, I wasn't really hooked into this whole world, so this one was just okay as well. And the next one up was Hex Life, and I had such high hopes for this book, and I kind of came out on the other side with what a lot of people said about this book, that they really thought that this was going to be awesome, these tales of witches and witchery and stuff like that. And of course it has this beautiful cover and all of these occult symbols carry through the book as well. But I have to say that I read the first chunk of stories in here, and again, it was just okay. It really wasn't what I was expecting it to be. It's very much more along the urban fantasy side. I really wanted like forest witches and, you know, lots of magic and lots of nature and that sort of thing. And I'm sure there's probably stories in here that are like that, but the ones that I picked out to read, they were just okay. So again, this book was just okay. I decided that I was going to lay this one down. It's not a DNF, it's just on hold right now because, like I said, I've been really looking for a book that's gonna hook me in, and I don't want to lay it down, something that I'm super excited about. I can't wait to pick it up, and this one wasn't it. So I was kind of a little bit disappointed in that fact, but again, this one is just on hold. I'm just gonna lay it aside, and hopefully when I read more of the stories, it's going to fulfill kind of what I wanted out of this one. But for what I read, you know, it's still, I would say, a 3-star book. So I would still recommend picking this one up if you were thinking of getting it and seeing if the stories work for you. And the next book that Matthew picked out was A Guide for Murdered Children. So just, I think I had to change up my TBR a little bit because I wasn't getting a whole lot of fulfillment out of the books that I had started reading. So I actually didn't read this one. I just laid it aside. I read over the synopsis again, and it wasn't something that I was super excited about. So I'm gonna put this one back on the shelf and give it a try another time. But I did replace these books with some other ones that turned out to be really good. So let's talk about those ones now. So the first ebook that I read this month, and this one was planned, I was planning on reading this one, was the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. And when you're filming, it is really hard to say that title without messing it up. Surprisingly hard. So I had to film that a couple of times, which is kind of funny. But anyway, getting into the book, I really enjoyed this book. I kind of wish that I had have gotten it on audio because, as it says right in the title, it has to do with Southern women. So it's these women who have a book club, and they have a theory that a neighbor of theirs, who is also a close friend with their husbands, is a vampire. And their husbands do not support them whatsoever. It's kind of maddening when you're reading this book and you read how the husbands treat their wives. It is incredibly maddening, but it's also fun at the same time. I kind of wish I had it on audio, like I said, because it would have been great to have the Southern accents and everything that would have come through, especially in the funnier parts of this book. But this book is like wide-ranging. So you have parts of this book that are sad, parts that are funny, parts that are really irksome. There's one scene in here that involves rats that I read this book before I went to bed every night, and I was like itchy lying in bed reading this scene. So if you have a thing with rats, probably either don't pick this one up or skip over that section. But overall, I really did enjoy this one. It is definitely along the lines of what I was expecting compared to what other people were saying on BookTube, and this is one that I am very late to the game in reading. So really glad that I finally picked this one up. I would say it was probably a 4-star read to me. It wasn't something that blew me out of the water. Like some people were like, this was my favorite read of the year, it's a 5-star book. It didn't quite make it there for me, but it was still really fun. It was super enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to reading more of Grady Hendrix because I did read My Best Friend's Exorcism last year, and that was in my top 5 books of the year. It was really good. So if you still haven't picked this one up yet and it's on your TBR, I would definitely recommend picking it up, especially if you're like me and you're looking for something that's like going to be a really great, satisfying read. I would definitely recommend picking this one up. I thoroughly enjoyed it from cover to cover. And next up on ebook that I had planned on reading this month was Pray Lied Eve by Lydia Peever, who is the host of Typical Books here on YouTube, and she is also involved heavily in the Horror Writers Association, and she has a podcast. Lydia is just so fantastic. I love her so much as a person, and I really wanted to pick up one of her works because she seems like the kind of person that I would really jive with their writing style. I think she's so eloquent, and she just has this inherent level of spookiness that's, it's not something that's a put on, like it's deep within her soul. And I'm so glad that I picked up this book. It's a really short read. It's only, I think, like 84 pages or something, I think the e-copy said. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book. This was a 4-star read for me, and I felt that Lydia's essence was in every corner of this book. Like, I would happily sit down and have her read to me from this collection of stories. It was fabulous. It was dark and macabre, and it was just perfect. And my favorite story in here, which was fantastic because it hooked me into the whole book, was the very first one, because it had kind of a spooky house kind of feel and somebody who was wondering if they were going crazy, and it had a little bit of like a Halloween sort of twist on it, and it was just fabulous. I mean, this is a super short collection of stories. If you're looking for something that just has that spooky feel from cover to cover, and you really enjoy Lydia as a person and her channel, please go pick this one up. She's such a talent, and she has just this quiet level of spookiness and horror and gothic darkness that I just love. And so definitely going to be picking up volume 2 and volume 3 very, very soon. But please try out Lydia's short stories. They're fantastic. And like I said, this was a 4-star read for me. So next up was a book that I hadn't planned on reading this month, but I wasn't expecting Lydia's book to be so short. So I picked this one up as well, which is also a short book. It's called Sour Candy by Kealan Patrick Burke. And this book was fabulous. The only thing I would say that's wrong with it was it was too short. So this book was less than 100 pages as well on my Kindle, but I was so hooked into this story. So since this wasn't part of my TBR, I'll just give you a little bit of an overview, which is kind of hard because it's kind of hard to sum up really short books without giving anything away. But essentially, this man goes to the store. He wants to buy some candy and chocolate and stuff for his girlfriend. They're kind of having a night in, and this kid starts screaming at the top of his lungs out of nowhere, and everybody is kind of looking at him and all of this kind of stuff, and the mother is not doing anything and she's kind of out of it. And all of a sudden, with many things in between happening, it turns out that this kid is actually this man's son. And the imagination and the level of just chills and spookiness and creepiness in this book is great. It's so good. I gave this book 4.5 stars, and I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, but really it was a 4.5 star read. But the only reason was because it was too short. It was so good that when I finished it, I almost wanted more. So if you love creepy kid stories, please read this book. It is worth picking up. I've heard of this book a few times on HorrorTube, and everyone seems to love it, and I did too. So please go pick up Sour Candy. It's super creepy and it just gives you the wiggins. It's so good. I really enjoyed this book. I read another one of Kealan Patrick Burke's last month that was a collection of short stories, and I was a little bit disappointed just because it didn't have the Halloween-y kind of feel that I was looking for and that I was expecting. But this one hit the nail right on the head. This is a fantastic book. So 4.5 stars. I just wish it was a little bit longer, but please go pick this one up. I can almost guarantee that you're not going to be disappointed with this one. So this month I actually did something new. I finally got an Audible subscription. So they had a special on where you get 2 months for free and 3 credits. So you get 2 credits up front and then you get 1 after the first month. And I'm really glad that I got it because I did have Scribd before, but I found that a lot of the books that I was looking for weren't on there, and for some reason it was super glitchy for me. Like, it would kind of cut off and then people would start talking again, but the first part of the sentence would be cut off, so it was really glitchy, so I got rid of it. I haven't had audiobooks now for probably about a year, I guess. Maybe a little bit less than a year, but super glad that I got the Audible subscription because it, you know, allows you to keep reading as you're doing your chores or baking or folding laundry or whatever. So the first book that I got on Audible was Helter, Skelter. And this was a 5-star read for me. This was my favorite book of the month. And I know a lot about the Manson murders, just like most people do, but it's surprising that a lot of people don't know about how extensive their crimes were and kind of the ins and outs of even the crimes that were really famous, of course, which was the Tate murders. So I had watched a lot of documentaries, I had done a lot of readings, and of course it was just 2 years ago that it was the 50th anniversary of that whole situation happening, because it happened in the summer of 1969. And I still found myself that I was looking for more, and that's why I kept watching more and more documentaries. But of course, when you're watching TV shows and stuff like that, they're under time constraints. You know, it's only an hour or a 90-minute documentary, and a lot of the nitty-gritty details and a lot of the dry details are left out. And this book was what really kind of filled the whole thing in for me, and it was great to put it on and just clean or do whatever, because it went really into detail about like the autopsy reports, about the people's lives and what they were like before they were murdered, of course, because these people were known for their murders, not known for what they were before. Of course, Sharon Tate was very famous, but they went into a lot about the LaBiancas, and a lot of people don't know about like Gary Hinman and Lotsa Papa and the other people that were involved. Shorty Shea was another one. And I found that this book just really filled in the entire crime and all of the details that I was looking for from beginning to end. So I feel very, very satisfied with my knowledge of the crimes, of the Manson crimes. And if you are also into true crime, I would highly recommend picking up this one. But even more than that, I would highly recommend getting the audiobook, because I think if you're reading it physically, it probably can be very dry in certain sections. But the way they have the audiobook done, it's very much like during the trials that you're actually sitting there in the courtroom. So they actually go through the courtroom transcripts, and when they're interviewing Manson and the girls and all of that, it really, really goes into depth. So I feel for the first time that I'm very satisfied with my knowledge of their crimes from beginning to end. And I think this is going to be a read that I'm going to redo every now and again, because that, of course, is a very famous crime. I love true crime. It's one of my favorite cases to learn about, and this is definitely the best source material of everything that happened. So 5 stars for this one. It took me a long time to get through. I think this is almost a 600-page book, but really, really, really enjoyed reading it on audio and just putzing around the house and, you know, having all of it play. And I think that's probably what I'm going to use my Audible subscription for the most part, is true crime stories. There's a lot of books that I haven't read that are true crime that I definitely want to check out on my Audible subscription. So really, really happy that I got it. And again, Helter Skelter is definitely a great one to read on audio if you're a true crime fan. And the other book that I am currently reading on Audible is The Good House. So like I said a few months ago, I had The Good House in a physical copy, but the text is very, very, very tiny. And I had started reading the book and it was just, I couldn't really get into it because I was straining my eyes so much, even with my glasses. The text is very, very small. And so I decided with one of my free credits to get The Good House on audio, and I'm really, really glad that I did. The narrator in this story does a fantastic job. I think this one might be one of my favorite audiobooks. So I'm still currently reading this book. I think I'm about halfway through, and it's fabulous. I mean, this is shaping up to be a minimum of a 4-star read. So I'm right there with everyone who says that this is a fantastic book. I really, really am enjoying my time with it, and it's great to just pop it on and hop in the bath or whatever. So again, enjoying the Audible subscription as well. And I will let you guys know in my December wrap up what my full thoughts of the book are, but it's really, really good. And like I said, it's going to be definitely a minimum of a 4-star read, unless something happens at the end that really pisses me off, but I don't think it's going to. So again, if you can get The Good House on audiobook, I highly recommend it. It's really, really good. And the last book that I finished this month, I actually had started it previously, is The Horror You Crave Volume 1 by Julio Miranda. And this author very kindly reached out to me and asked if I would like a copy of the book. And this was a few months ago. So he had reached out and then it was delayed being released, and I finally got a copy of it actually a couple of months ago. And usually when I get review copies, I try to get through them fairly quickly, of course, because I've promised to do a review. So with this book, and this is something that I'm finding with review copies from time to time, I did say, you know, I'm not sure if this is really my kind of horror, and Julio said, you know what, give it a try, and you know, whatever you have to say will be great, because I just want the book's name out there. So what I did was I read a few selections throughout this book, and I had to kind of break it up a little bit because this book has some body horror, you know, it's ooey gooey. And as you guys know, if you're a regular watcher of this channel, you know that that's not really my style of horror. So I would have to read one of the stories and put it aside and move on to something else, and then come back and read another one. So I did read a fair selection of these stories, but I didn't give this book a star rating because, like I said, this is not really my type of horror. So I don't think it will be fair to give it, you know, a star rating. But this is what I will tell you, is that this book is very well written. The stories are imaginative and compelling. There's one in here that's specifically like, this guy buys this ratty old mask and it pretty much possesses him. And I did enjoy that story to the degree that, you know, the theme and the imagination and the synopsis of the story was awesome. But again, this is not really my kind of horror. So not giving it a star rating, but I will tell you that if you're into body horror and you like the ooey gooey and stuff like that, please go check this one out. It is an indie author, and of course I'm going to try to help him spread the word of the book as much as I can. So if you're into that kind of stuff, go check this one out from Julio Miranda. It is on Goodreads, and I believe you could probably get it through Amazon. So thank you very much to the author for sending this to me. And, you know, I did promise that I would tell you guys my thoughts. So that's honestly what I thought. So it wasn't for me, but still a well-written manuscript. So if you like that kind of thing, go check it out. So there you guys go. So it was kind of a little bit of a weird reading month. I had some books that were really good, some that I decided that I'm just gonna set aside and try another time, and some that were kind of mediocre. So I think I actually did pretty well with this month. You know, it's almost like when you're reading and you keep having ones that you set aside and stuff like that, you kind of get a little bit discouraged. But then when you look at the month as a whole, you realize that, hey, I really did have a pretty solid reading month. So I was pleased with it overall. So I'm still on the hunt for that one book that's going to really blow me out of the water for the end of the year. So hopefully that will come up in December. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Leave me a question or a comment down below, because you know I love chatting with you. And I just wanted to throw in here that leaving comments and likes and stuff like that on these videos really does help people out, especially when you're a small YouTuber. It's really hard to gain traction on this platform. So if you don't have anything to say, just leave a heart or a check mark or just say hi. You know, I would really appreciate it if you guys would put something down below in the comments. But until next time, stay spooky, guys. Bye.